we'll see if anyone else joins in. I might just actually pop into my office
Yeah, go ahead.
and check my email.
Morning.
Morning.
Hello?
You're early.
Yeah. we have anyone who's joined us? Oh yeah, it looks like it.
Oh, good.
Oh, good. Hi guys. Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, good, perfect.
We can't see you though.
But you can't see me? Oh, Ronnie. Well, that would be a bummer. I better put the camera on. I would like to know who's on the Samsung phone. I see Ronnie and Emily.
Brenda?
Who's on the Samsung?
Brenda.
Would you spell your name for me?
Brenda.
Oh, did you say Brenda?
Yeah.
Oh, well, welcome.
I'm sitting in the hospital on my phone, so I thought I'd not.
You're in the hospital?
My mom is.
Oh, with your mom. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so yeah, that's why my name doesn't show up.
Well, I turned the video on. Hello, hello.
We can see you now. Nice.
You can see me now. Hi. There you go. I really appreciate you guys coming. We have Laura Pitson in the room here. And Ronnie, you're a long timer as well. So there definitely is a breadth of experience here. But I run a boot camp once a month for sellers and also for buyers, with the primary purpose of the boot camp to go over all the forms and the documents that you need to assist both a seller and a buyer. And today we're just working on the seller. But I don't think I've had the chance to give any of you this little background. So I'm going to start with what I normally do with all the brand new agents. And I always let them know that I started in real estate right out of college. And it was unexpected to me. I wasn't really planning to do it. I envisioned myself in a corporate career working, downtown Minneapolis in a high rise. But my in-laws suggested that I get my real estate license. And I thought, well, to be considerate, if they're suggesting this, I should probably do it. So I got my real estate license, and then I just let it linger for a few months. But it was a parade of homes. They asked me to sit in a builder model home of theirs, and it was in Belle Plaine. So it took me almost an hour drive to get there from where I was living, and it was in the winter, and I was not really excited about this great opportunity. But again, I was trying to be a good daughter-in-law, and I was trying to figure out if this might be something I was interested in. And the very first two people who ever walked into that model home for me ended up buying houses. And my eyes were really open to the reality that you can't sell someone a house. You can't sell someone on the fact that they should list their home. It's a decision that they make entirely on their own, but with you as their advisor and as their helper. And the reason I know I was able to sell those two houses to those first two families that came in was because I was a lot like them. And who do we like? We like people who are like us, right? We like to think that, maybe the pace of our voice and our interests and our styles, we like people who are like us. But my real estate career completely took off and made a huge change when I went to a sales seminar. And at this sales seminar, it was just awesome. The instructor, he was this really goofy kind of mad scientist looking man, and he had this long mustache and he had this wiry crazy hair. And he started the class by saying, so, welcome, you're all realtors, congratulations, I'm sure you're great at your career. And this was probably 2003, so the real estate market was really starting to heat up. And he said, now how many of you in the room sell the way you want to be sold to? And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was like a kindergarten classroom. I mean, people were like literally holding their hand up like, pick me, of course I sell the way I want to be sold to. And he gave everyone in the room the chance to say why they sold the way they like to be sold to. And there was a wide variety of answers. There were very analytical people who said, I just give every detail because you could not possibly make this gigantic investment unless you have studied every fact about the house, you understand all the mechanics of the house, you've explored all of your options. It was like, okay. And then someone else down the way would say, well, I just make concise decisions and I try to give just the basics, and if they want to work with me, they'll work with me, but if they don't, that's okay, and we just make quick decisions. And everyone kind of gave their piece and said a few things, and he said, well, then I'm going to suggest to you that if you only sell the way you want to be sold to, you're losing 75% of your prospective buyers. And it was like light bulbs just went off all over the room because, you know, we've taken the DISC, we've taken all these various different personality type assessments, and you probably know what your personality type is. But if you are one personality type trying to sell to another personality type on the opposite end of the spectrum, they're just not going to feel comfortable with you, bottom line. They're not going to, building trust is going to be harder, building rapport is going to be harder. So he said that his number one piece of sales advice, hi, welcome, thanks for joining us. You're just getting to the punchline of my story, and that's the number one piece of sales advice that I received in the past 22 years of doing my job, and that is that if you only sell the way you like to be sold to, if you only work in your kind of personality type and don't mirror and model your clients, you'll lose 75% of your prospective clients. And he gave an acronym that I thought was so much easier to remember than the DISC assessment, and he calls it BOLT, and it's bulls, owls, lambs, and tigers. So if you can envision those animals, you can group 4 different personality types into these categories. So I like to talk about them from people that I know. So my husband is a total bull. He makes quick decisions, he knows what he wants, he drives a big truck, everything to him comes just quick and easy, he doesn't overanalyze anything, so he's a bull. Then there's an owl, and that's my dad. My dad is incredibly analytical. He likes to know what's the miles per gallon, and he likes to know, you know, if this doesn't work out for me, what are the possibilities of getting my earnest money back if I were to cancel? Then in Bolt, the next is lamb. My little sister is a bit of a lamb. She says like, well, I think I want to live in this neighborhood, but God, I don't know, is it gonna be hard with the traffic, and it seems kind of expensive, do I actually deserve it? I don't really know, they kind of hem and haw, the lambs. Then there's tigers, and some people call me a tiger because I'm kind of zesty and energetic and kind of crazy sometimes. I like to think I'm a mix of all those personality types, but when you see me here in the office, you probably often see my tiger. And that's someone who says like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have a Cinco de Mayo party, we better put up decorations. And oh my gosh, I love that house because I love the fireplace. And I've always wanted that type of refrigerator. I've gotta have it and I've gotta have it now. So I take the time to explain this at all of the boot camps because I'm about to explain the forms to you that are necessary to being a professional real estate agent, but I'm going to describe them to you as if I'm an owl, and I'm not an owl, so it's kind of boring sometimes. But you need to know the ins and outs of these documents. And I'll show you online, I'll show you where you can go to our dashboard, and on the dashboard is a recording of me with every single form. So if you have to pull out something that you haven't used in a while, but maybe you've never used before, you can just cut right to the chase with like a 30-second or sometimes a 3-minute a recording of me talking through these forms. So if these are redundant to you, if this is something that you feel like you really have down pat and you have to step out of the call or you have other things that you'd like to do, I don't mind whatsoever. But as we go through, just remember, I'm talking to you as if you're an owl, even though I know that you're not an owl. So, any questions for me before we get started? No? Okay, all right. I have some handouts for the participants in the room, so let me give those to you. And then I'll get the computer rolling. Ronnie, what do you think your personality type is? A bull, owl, lamb, or tiger? How about you, Laura? What do you think yours is?
Gosh, I got barely any owl in me, but maybe a little bit of a bull and a little bit of a lamb. Oxymoron.
I like it. I like it. Ronnie, can you put yourself in a category? Are you a bull, owl, a lamb, or a tiger?
I'm a tiger, straight up.
Oh, I can tell. All right, well, I'm gonna stop my video and I'm gonna start sharing my screen instead. All so kind as to sign in. And then have you logged into the North Star MLS yet?
Yes.
Oh, you have, good, perfect. You help me with the pronunciation of your name.
Nazira.
Nazira.
It's
Okay.
pretty.
I know, it's beautiful. Alrighty, now the most important form that we're gonna start with is agency relationships and real estate. And as I am logging into that, let's see here, maybe I need to minimize this. It's weird, for some reason it's not pulling up a browser screen. Can anyone see what I'm doing wrong here? Maybe it's already open? There we go. All right, so all of you, it sounds like, have logged into the North Star MLS before. Not enough memory to open this page. That's a little strange. Oh, here we go. Good, good, good. Maybe going nice and slow for us today, I think. Sorry about that. Is anyone else online right now?
Yeah.
Nazira, you are? And it stopped being so slow for you?
Yeah, no.
Okay. I normally don't log this up in advance because some of the participants who come to boot camp have never even used the North Star MLS before, so I like to show them the tactical steps of how to get on it.
There were some, well, she's on, there were some updates to it yesterday.
Were
I
there?
wonder if that was, there's a,
Might be. That's really strange. I don't know why we'd be able to be on Zoom, but not on a browser. Very strange. Apologies, you guys. Just gonna snap a picture of this to show Jason so that he knows what our technical difficulties were. We're gonna get on here eventually though, I'm sure of it.
do you want me to go, should I go see if he's
Yeah,
able
would
to
you
help?
mind? Yeah, thank you.
Where, is his office just down this road?
It is. It's actually all the way down at the end though, and you hook a left and it's like the first one on the left.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's weird because Zoom is working, but even when I try to log into this additional browser, it just gives like a snap not working message.
I was just telling her that oddly enough, I was just logging into see how things
You're creeping on me?
go. Literally just checking it out to see.
It's just, I'm just scooping. Yeah, of course, yeah. Good to meet you.
All right, well, there's this thing that you say, nothing is working now. Hey, Ronnie? Is he the only one on there?
No, there were also Brenda and Emily.
All right, we're gonna have to log in and log out again.
Jason, why are you yelling?
I'm always loud, brother. I didn't know if you'd be able to hear me, but we're gonna have, the whole computer is messed up right now. So we're gonna log in and log out. We'll have to re-sign in to the site.
Do we do that as well?
I don't know that it will cut you out, but I don't know that it won't.
Okay.
When you do that, I'm just gonna get started with Nastya over here. Doesn't mean that it's not still the same, yeah, that it's not still considered dual agency. There's also something that I really never saw in the 20 years of doing real estate, but it's become very, very popular right now, where it's called a facilitator. And Keller Williams requires that, oh, look it, reboot. That's all you had to do was reboot
Did you
it.
try turning it off and on again?
I didn't.
No, I know, but
Keller
it's.
Williams requires a minimum commission of 2% on the facilitator, where the minimum commission on everything else is 5%. And so this is a good way to offer a cost savings to someone who's kind of said, like, I want to sell my house to my grandchild, or my neighbor's brother wants to buy this house. You can offer to just facilitate the transaction for them. Regardless of the agency relationships, though, you still owe them loyalty, confidentiality, that old car acronym. Cool? All right. Well, that was pretty fast.
Yeah.
Jason's got us He takes care of us real well. Okay, so logging in. One other thing that I want to show you is the Keller Williams KWPR dashboard, and I can't remember the exact, oh, here we go. KWPR-dashboard.com is where all of the recordings that I mentioned, you can access me if you want to go back in and say, how exactly did Melissa talk through the legality of this form? And that's right here in the on-demand training. Have any of you ever utilized this aspect already? There's lots of other buyer and seller boot camps in there, and then like I said, every individual form is recorded as well. Lots of other good things on the KWPR dashboard if you haven't been on them yet. All right, so we're gonna go into the Minnesota Realtor Forms and Transaction Desk. I have created a transaction for seller and buyer boot camps, but I want to be sure to show you if you were to, let's see here, if you were to be in a listing, let's just say you're working on a listing, and you want to, like, let's just pretend this was a house that was sold 3 years ago, and now you're going to be relisting it for them. You can check on that exact address, you can check on that exact MLS ID number, and you can use this little tool up here, which is the white box and the green kind of starburst looking thing, and that can take you into Instanet, and that can create a transaction from there. Have you done that one yet?
No.
No? Okay. This is definitely the easier way to start both an offer and a listing, and it takes you through this little wizard, and it asks you if you'd like to use the Keller Williams buyer rep, listing paperwork, purchase agreement and buyer rep, or just the purchase agreement docs. And then it takes you through a little wizard and easily fills in so many of the blanks. But for the purpose of today, we're just gonna go to my seller bootcamp. Let's see. And for some reason, I get all of these offers that everyone in our office does, and so sometimes I have to scroll way down to find my. Just are not going very seamlessly or efficiently today, are they? Usually I don't have to scroll this far, I better search for it. All right, so once you're in here, in the transaction, I always find it helpful to go over here to the right-hand column that says Forms. When you click on Forms, then they're over here just in a nice list for you, and this is how I like to talk through the forms. Agency relationships in real estate is not a contract, it's just an educational only, but Minnesota law requires that we describe to all prospective customers the various different agency relationships that we can have with them. So we need to outline that we can represent them as a seller, put a for sale sign in their front yard and assist just them in their best interest of selling their homes. We can represent a buyer where we can make an offer on properties and negotiate for just a buyer's best interest. Occasionally you come upon the instance where we would be in a dual agency situation where you represent both the buyer and the seller, or if the real estate brokerage represents the buyer or the seller, that's also considered dual agency. The main reason it needs to be disclosed is, as you can imagine, if you're representing both a buyer and a seller, you'll have private and confidential information on both of them, but either party may have concern that you are not keeping their private information confidential. It is becoming a lot more common right now where people are facilitating transactions. This would be an instance where You might be selling a house, for example, to someone's neighbor, or maybe you're selling it to their grandson. You're not having to show them houses, you're not having to help them determine the price. They've already worked that all out on their own. You're just doing the paperwork for them and facilitating for them. It's important that you know, though, that if you are facilitating, you don't owe any of the fiduciary responsibilities listed below except confidentiality, unless it's outlined on a facilitation agreement. So as you guys know, the fiduciary responsibilities that you owe to clients have the acronym OLD-CAR, and that's obedience and loyalty and disclosure. You must disclose all material facts that you happen to know about a property. And confidentiality, you need to keep all their private information in confidence. You will account for any money that they give you with good, reasonable care, and accounting would be when they give you your earnest money, for example. You also have to let them know on this form that you are not going to be discriminating against anyone, certainly not any protected classes. And in the state of Minnesota, you are not allowed to discriminate against predatory offenders. This isn't going to come into play very often when helping a seller sell their house, but it will when you're helping a buyer purchase a home. They would certainly want to know if there was someone who was on the registered sex offender list who lives in the area that they are making an offer on the house, and so they would have to do that research on their own. I love starting with this form because it is truly educational, it's just informational, and you then, I feel like, build pretty good rapport with the seller and the buyer, and you then can just have them sign. They've got their little pen warmed up, they've got their wrist warmed up, and they feel a little bit more comfortable signing all the rest of the documents. So again, because I'm talking through these to you as if you're an owl in personality type, you're probably not going to go in quite as much detail, but I just want you to at least have heard this and have heard how to properly talk through each of the pages. So we're going to do the listing contract. That's the next form that you'll use when helping a seller. It's very important to us from compliance, from the Market Center standpoint, that the date of the contract, the start date of the contract here on line 9, and also the date that they sign it are all consistent and the same. If they're not, we go then to the latest date, and that may mean that there may be some days that you thought you were under contract with them and you actually weren't, if you run into a predicament where there's multiple realtors who are kind of fighting over who gets to have the listing. So it's important on a listing contract that you write in the address, self-explanatory here, you write the city, the county, the legal description, and the legal description can always be accessed on the North Star MLS. It can also be accessed on the county website. It'll be automatically filled in that the brokerage is Keller Williams Preferred Realty, but you would write the seller's names in here. And then you would write in the date that the contract starts and the date that the contract ends. Now, most people at Keller Williams Preferred Realty have all their listing and buyer contracts dated for 1 full year. That would be a really, really long time for someone like my husband, someone who's a bull, who says, I'm not gonna let you list my house and keep it under contract for a full year without you proving to me that you're doing a good job. So you can shorten it to any length of time that you wish. I think a reasonable amount on here is around 3 months, maybe 4 months or 6 months. If you can just have it be 1 year, that is definitely going to be in your best interest because you're putting so much work in for a seller. You also need to write what the list price is going to be for the property. Now, a lot of people are saying, hey, we're signing these listing contracts, 2, 3, sometimes 4 months before we ever even intend to go on the North Star MLS. And so I don't know what the exact price is going to be. Well, if you write in there to be determined, or if you just leave it blank, it is not a valid binding contract, and someone else can come in and put their valid binding contract with rights over yours. So you do have to put a number in there, and then the listing contract can always be amended. The seller offers this property for sale at this price upon the following terms, and terms are what the financing terms are going to be available for this property. So almost anyone would sell their house cash. Most people are willing to sell their home conventional or to a veteran through a VA loan. Some communities, however, like condo buildings and associations, are not FHA financing approved, so there's a possibility that you might not be able to write FHA in as a term, and you need to work through that and talk about that with the association management company if you're a part of an association. There's a loan that you can utilize in rural areas where people can actually buy a house with zero money down. And if this is USDA available, it's really important that you put that on the listing and also on the MLS input form, because that's a unique opportunity that people are likely seeking out. Likewise, contract for deed is also a very unique opportunity, and if you have a seller who doesn't immediately need all the proceeds from their sale and they're willing to delay receiving those proceeds and instead get a monthly payment from the buyer of their house on what's called a contract for deed, that could be something that would really broaden and open up your pool of buyers as well. So most often you'll put in here cash, conventional, VA. Occasionally you'll put in FHA, USDA, and contract for deed. You need to let the seller know that by signing this listing agreement, they are giving us as the brokerage the exclusive right to list, market, and advertise this property for sale. It does also give us permission to list their property on the North Star MLS, which syndicates to a lot of websites that consumers are using to search for houses. And they need to give us permission to do that. So we explained to them here that there are IDX websites, which means there are websites that are operated by brokers participating in the MLS, and consumers can view these sites, but they don't necessarily have to have an agency relationship, so they can just use those websites and browse for their curiosity. And as you can imagine, with the number of people that are browsing online, we need to make sure that we receive seller's consent. Hey there, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks for coming. We need to make sure that we have the seller's consent to display their private information on the internet. So it seems logical, if you're listing your house, that means you want your listing displayed on the internet, and that you'd logically also put your address on the internet. But not everyone agrees to that. If there's been some sort of sad situation, maybe there's been a death or a divorce, for whatever reason someone may seek privacy and they actually do not want their listing on the internet or their address on the internet. So you have to give them the option to check yes or no. I prefer you not send this out for electronic signatures, just checking all these yes boxes until you've talked to them. Otherwise you can put an optional yes box checks on there, which is the best case scenario. These last two are debatable. A lot of realtors in the office here check no. I recommend that you advise to your clients that if they are going to list their house on the MLS with the address, or if they agree to have it on the internet with the address, that they also allow the automatic valuation and that they also allow comments. These syndicated websites like Zillow and Realtor.com just don't want the trouble. They just don't want the drama of having consumers complaining about, their pictures being up too long, or, someone, this gave an automatic valuation that was too low, or someone made a comment that said like, oh, they don't like my dogs, they bark, and they can hear them across the neighborhood all night long. But the chances of that happening are so slim, and so I recommend checking yes here so that the Zillows and the Realtors.coms don't just filter them out, and that has been known to happen. There's a possibility that someone who is selling their house may just need out of their house, and if they can't sell it, they're willing to lease it. So on this listing agreement form, it asks specifically, is this property also going to be listed for lease? And may the realtor advertise it for lease throughout the terms of the contract? And most people check no. But keep in mind, you should ask everyone if that's something that they're interested in so that you can appropriately check those boxes here. It goes on to talk about what the seller's obligations are in signing this listing contract with us. So they obviously need to give us access to the property. They obviously need to continue paying their association dues and their utilities. We want to recommend to them that they take all of their personal private belongings and remove them or hide them for safekeeping. So that would be like jewelry and prescriptions and any guns or hunting equipment that they might have. We also make sure that they understand that state statute specifically prohibits them from recording any conversations that happen at the house during showings or during walkthroughs. We need to make sure and let them know that they have to turn their nanny cams off, that they have to turn their baby monitors off, and that their Ring doorbells are even a little bit on the fringe of not being allowable. Once we take photos of their house, which is a requirement for the North Star MLS, you have to have at least one photo. The seller consents that those photos then become our property, that we have permission to use them on our websites, in our marketing. And there are definitely some people who come back and say, you know, my house has been sold for a year, I want those pictures down, offline. And though we can work hard to try to assist them in doing that, this section here, lines 107 through 112, is what gives us permission to be able to do so. Next, we go on to talk about commission. And to be honest, I skip over this section, I talk about the rest of the form, and then I come back to it. This is literally just on the bottom of page 3, and I feel like there's so much more to talk about. And so to create value to them, to show them all the things that you're going to do to earn that commission, I'd like to go down here to line 147. And I say, any realtor who represents the buyer of your house is going to be expecting real estate commission. The real estate commission goes to the brokerage of the buyer's agent who represents the buyer of the house. And so as a part of your listing agreement with me, you are allowing me to compensate those cooperating brokers. Our brokerage minimum is paying out 2.7% of the gross sales price to a cooperating broker representing the buyer. It's important to notice the distinction here between representing and assisting. We talked briefly in the last form about facilitating. You can facilitate for 2 parties, but if you've already signed a listing agreement like this and you're already representing a seller, you can't also then facilitate for a buyer. For whatever reason, the state of Minnesota doesn't allow that. So you would have to do something called assisting the buyer. And that's doing the exact same work for them, you just don't have the contract for it. So you'll want to advertise on the MLS that whether those realtors are representing a buyer or assisting a buyer, that you do agree to pay them out 2.7%. This doesn't come up very often, but it is a good idea to make sure and check both boxes 149 and 51, filling in 2.7 there. We also need to let the sellers know that they are going to be attending a closing appointment where they sign over the deed and the ownership of their house to the new buyer, and that we do that at what's called a title company. We can get all of the documents that the title company needs to prepare that closing date work by just sending it over, since we have it already, but we can't send it over if for some reason the seller wants to arrange it all on their own. So this is giving us consent and permission. It's showing that we've talked about, hey, is it all right that I send over these very private and confidential legal documents to another company? And most often the sellers will say, yes, I absolutely want you to do that for me. It is kind of funny during this, when I talk about this, because occasionally you will have a couple look at one another and they'll be like, oh my goodness, I totally forgot. My Aunt Betty is a title closer, and she always said, if you're gonna ever buy or sell a house, you need to close with me. So unless something really personal like that has happened to your buyer or seller, most often you're just gonna check line 164. The sellers need to know that there are fees that they have to pay to the title company and to the government, and there are also additional costs that the seller may be required to pay. So those may be things like they might have to pay for a home warranty if the buyer requests it. They may have to prepay for some documents from their association company. We then go on to ask if they are a U.S. resident. If they are not a U.S. resident, they are to be checking that they are a foreign individual on both this listing contract, their seller's disclosure, and also the purchase agreement. It's not as important for you in the seller's shoes to really dig into and to really know this, but when representing your buyers, it's really important, and it's often overlooked, but it's really important because if a person is not a U.S. citizen, they own a home in the U.S., they sell it, and they make proceeds, if they don't pay taxes on those proceeds, it can be tracked back and the new buyer might be responsible for paying it, which just seems crazy. It's a section in the Internal Revenue Code, and I don't understand it myself, but that's a lot of responsibility to put on a buyer when it's really the seller's responsibility to be honest about it. But it's very, very, very important for you, especially when representing buyers, to pay attention to it. We then have to reflect back to that first form that we went through, and we have to say to our sellers, now, as you can imagine, I work in an office where there are 200 realtors who do the same thing as me. We're right here in the South Metro, and I'm listing this beautiful home for you for Burnsville. In Burnsville, there's a high possibility that someone from my office is going to show your house, and a possibility that their buyer may make an offer on it. Even though I'm representing you and they would be representing them, it's still considered a dual agency situation because we're in the same brokerage. And you have to give me permission to agree to consider a dual agency situation and offers that are made by other agents in the same brokerage. Do you give me permission to do that? And most sellers will say like, yes, absolutely. Whoever sells my house, I really don't care. I just want it sold for top dollar. So you'll check here then that they do agree to it. I have had one seller in my experience who did not agree to a dual agency representation, and that was just their personal prerogative, and so we checked the second box there. We also need to let the sellers know that there is a possibility that during the term of their contract and working with me to sell their house, that their neighbor may ask me to come list their house. Maybe a buyer comes in who wants to buy their house that I represented them previously, but they have a different realtor now. So there's other potential sellers and other previous relationships that I as a licensed realtor can have had with any of the moving parts of this transaction or this community. They certainly can end their seller listing agreement with us, and we would just do so by writing a cancellation form. It also automatically terminates at the expiration of the contract, which is on the first page. The seller is agreeing that they will indemnify and hold harmless the brokerage against any and all claims of liability, damage, or risk of loss from any misrepresentation, omissions of fact, breaches of promise. This is a really nice protection for you. And again, if you're working with a bull, if you're working with a lamb, you're probably not going to talk through this, in high detail, but if you're working with an owl, you probably should. We also need to make sure, and we touched on this in the last form, that the seller understands that we refuse to discriminate in any case with any of the protected classes here in the state of Minnesota. There may be some notices that the seller receives from their county or for their city, and they need to make sure and give all that notice and all that information to us as the listing brokerage. Then we go on to just a few miscellaneous items here that talk about how anytime we have them sign anything in ink or electronically, those two signatures are just as valid. There's no difference between the two. That by signing this agreement and providing us with their phone number and their email address, they are giving us consent to send them text messages, to send them email messages, and anything that we do is going to be in writing. There's not going to be any oral agreements, and it doesn't become a part of the agreement unless it's executed by both the seller and also us as the broker. So I'm going to go back up now and talk about commission, and as you can see, or maybe as you can feel from the flow, it's a lot easier to talk about commission last than right in the middle. So that's why I choose to flip over it and then come back to it. But Mr. and Mrs. Seller, as we've talked about, I am going to be listing your home. As you know, I'm going to be paying 2.7% to the realtor who represents the buyer. And then there's also a real estate commission that's paid to Keller Williams Preferred Realty. And I highly recommend, as you guys are role-playing this and as you're dialoguing this and working through, make sure and get in the habit of talking about how this commission is paid to Keller Williams Preferred Realty, because there's such a misconception that you as a realtor are just rolling in the dough, you're making so much money. They forget that we also have to pay taxes, they forget that we also have to pay our expenses, and they certainly don't know what our brokerage split is. And so it's really important, I think, that you let them know that the real estate compensation all gets paid to Keller Williams Preferred Realty. Then from that, 2.7% goes to the buyer's broker, some goes to Keller Williams, and the rest comes to us. The commission that we ask you guys to strive for here is 6%. The minimum commission that we agree to is 5%. That means that you would be making less than the buyer's realtor, so don't cut yourself short. Make sure that you're at least making 5.4% so that you both make 2.7%. We also then want to make sure and disclose here when it comes to compensation that should dual agency exist, the commission rate shall be negotiable. The reason I want you to get in the habit of including this in your listing contracts is you guys are working hard to get these listings and you're super excited about that open house. And if someone comes into the open house and they don't already have a realtor and dual agency exists, you fully have it within your right to say, hey, I'm, hogging this deal is kind of the industry terminology. I'm making the commission on both the buyer and the seller, so I agree to lower that commission from 6% down to something else. But if there's multiple offers on your listing and you haven't disclosed that to the other realtors who are representing those other buyers, they're not gonna consider it a level playing field. They're gonna say you're playing dirty pool because you didn't tell them, yes, I'm selling in dual agency and I'm able to do so because my client has less selling expenses because I've reduced the commission. There's a second spot that you need to put it, and I'll show you where that is on another form coming up. Any questions on that?
So I've gotten asked if I'm able to reduce my commission if someone else, say you're the buyer's agent, I'm
Yeah.
the seller's agent, since we're both in the same office with dual agency, I got asked to reduce commission. And I said no, and it was kind of hard to explain a little bit, but
Yeah, and when you said no, did you say it to the other realtor or did you say it to your seller?
to my seller.
To your seller, oh, yeah,
This,
interesting.
well, so this is when we were discussing the contracts
Yeah,
right away, so like, or so I said 6%, the buyer's agent obviously gets the 2.7.
yeah,
And they're like, okay, so if a buyer's agent comes in out of your office, are you willing to cut the commission?
yeah.
And then
And I think really to pacify them and to build rapport and build trust, say, sure, absolutely, we can negotiate that at that time.
Okay.
Because the likelihood of it is just so small
Mhm.
that when that time comes up, you can actually show them and nuts and bolts, like this is exactly how much we're talking about. But you can also make sure and remind them that the brokerage minimum is 5%. So I don't know what they're thinking they could negotiate, probably all the way down to 2.7, right? And you can
Yeah.
even pull out the policy that I have in my office and I can give you a copy of to just keep in your portfolio. You just simply can't reduce commission here below 5%. And that's because Keller Williams Preferred Realty is a profit sharing company and they are in business to make money and to provide income to fuel people's lives and hopes and dreams and families. And so we're not a nonprofit and we don't want to reduce the amount of money that the brokerage would make to keep the lights on, and we don't want to reduce the amount of commission that our agents are making who need to pay expenses and other household expenses that they have for themselves. But I think really, depending on the personality type, the easy answer to that is absolutely, we can totally negotiate that if it comes up.
Okay.
Then it makes
Yep.
them feel like they've got to win. It
Yeah.
doesn't tie you into writing something on there, except for that you said, should dual agency exist, the commission rate shall be negotiable. It doesn't say
Okay.
what you negotiate down to.
For sure.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Melissa, I have a question.
Yeah.
So what about if I'm representing a buyer and some of these new construction homes, maybe it's not happening here in the state, but it might start to happen where these builders are now offering 2%, 1.5. What's our standard as KWPR? Do we take the deal or?
You can, yeah, you can take the deal. We don't have a minimum commission that you would be paid as a buyer. So you can take whatever is offered. And then there are a couple people in here who I've been incredibly impressed. I've never done so myself, but they've negotiated with their client and said, hey, you committed to me in signing this buyer representation form that you'd pay me 2.7%. I'm only getting 2% from the builder. So at closing, you have to bring 0.7% to closing to pay. Now again, don't say to pay me, say to pay
Yeah.
Keller Williams Preferred Realty. Like, have them call your broker, put it on me. I don't want it to be on you.
But you can take you don't have to ask.
You don't have to.
If you don't have to, it's okay to go low. Let's say that.
It is. Yep, it
There's
is.
no
For sure. Oh, yeah.
Right, there's no minimum on the buyer commission. We wanna fight for you, we wanna represent you, we know how hard you guys are working, and so whatever I need to do to step in and assist you, I will. But you can accept any lower amount commission that you wish.
And one more thing, just that I know it passed away. It just just clarification for the minimum is 2.7 to pay out for the
Yes.
buyer, and the same amount for the facilitator. Right.
Actually, a facilitator is just 2% total.
Oh, 2%
So
total.
rather than 6%, it's 2% total. And if the parties want to split that evenly, like 1 and 1, that's fine. Or most often, the commission is just paid 100% by the seller, so it'd be,
Oh, no, if you are the listing agent and then you have to pay out for the facilitator, same as the real estate agent. That's the question.
yep, so if you are a facilitator, you're likely representing both the buyer and the seller.
And the
Not-
seller.
Yep, and also representing the buyer. It's not very often that there would be a facilitator representing
The
the
buyer.
buyer.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep. I think I'm understanding your question. If you are already under a seller representation contract for a seller at 6%, and a agent comes in representing a buyer, they could be just facilitating that buyer and they can be paid 2.7%. But if you sign a facilitation agreement, not a seller representation, you can charge any commission you want, but the minimum is 2%. Yeah, so if you think you're going to put it on the MLS, you should do it for 4.7% so that you can pay those cooperating realtors 2.7.
Okay.
But most sellers are not going to ask you to just be a facilitator and put it on the MLS. They'll ask you to be a facilitator and they'll bring both parties already. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sort of-ish? Okay, good. There's also a clause in here that's a little tricky to explain, and so again, depending on the personality type, I try to either breeze through it really quick or I'll give it to you in more detail right now. But let's pretend it's not a seller's market and you're working with a seller to sell a really unusual property. Let's say, like I knew one time there was someone who had a wild animal like zoo in Lakeville. It was like 25 acres and all kinds of barns and all kinds of animals. And as you can imagine, it may be kind of hard to find a buyer for that type of property. So you listed a listing agreement for 6 months. It didn't actually sell during that time, but you kept good records of every realtor who showed it. You created what's called a protected list, and upon the expiration of the listing contract, you sent over to your seller, hey, I'm sorry that I couldn't sell your house, or I'm sorry you canceled this listing agreement and I couldn't get it sold. I do want to provide to you, though, our brokerage protected list. You have to give that to them within 72 hours. And then if any of those people who had shown the house at that time make an offer on it within this time frame, Keller Williams Preferred Realty is still contractually bound to receive the commission, even if it gets relisted with another real estate company. So as you can imagine, that'd be very expensive for the seller. But this clause in here is 100% to protect you. If you can't sell their house during the time frame of the contract, this protects you for even a little bit longer to make sure that someone isn't saying like, oh, hey, you know, we're coming to the end of our contract. Why don't you just wait to make an offer until my contract has expired? Then you can make an offer to me as a facilitator and we can just cut the realtor right out and that'll save me a bunch of money. We don't want that to happen. We want to protect you so that all the work and all the marketing and all the effort that you put in is received compensation on. So you can have this protected list last for up to 6 months, so a maximum of 180 days. Most people put in there like 60 or 30 days. You don't really want to be monitoring this for 6 months anyway. Any questions on that?
Yep.
Okay. The next two forms are not forms that are mandated by state statute or the Minnesota Association of Realtors. They're actually just forms that are unique to Keller Williams Preferred Realty, and this one is literally my all-time favorite. Because I've sold so many houses throughout the years and represented a home builder for so many years, there are clauses in here that I wish someone would have brought to the attention and put in writing of my buyers and sellers. So this form is going to be used whether you're helping a buyer or a seller, but this form will be something that you will possibly have to reflect back on and say like, hey, you know, if you remember when we signed the listing agreement, I pointed it out that something like this could happen, and we did inform you, we did disclose to you this. So a seller is going to be required to fill out a seller's disclosure statement. We have a seller's disclosure and a seller's disclosure alternative that are provided to us through the Minnesota Association of Realtors. They're very thorough, they're very good, they cover all the bases. A seller can actually just write on a sheet of paper their seller's disclosure if they wish to, but I strongly encourage them to use the forms that we have accessible to us on Instanet. We also need to make sure, especially that sellers understand that it is a high probability that the buyer of their house is going to request a home inspection be conducted. The seller needs to be out of the house for it. Then there may even be some requests that the buyer makes of repairs that a seller has to make after a home inspection. And there's also a possibility that the buyer may ask the seller to place a warranty on the home at closing. And those are all things that you'll talk about with both buyers and sellers, but I just talked through it the way that I would dialogue it with the seller themselves. It's a really good seller's market. We're very fortunate as sellers right now, so there's a high probability that you're going to receive multiple offers once I list your home, but you have the right to choose whether or not myself and anyone at my brokerage has the right to divulge the existence of those offers. Now, under no circumstances would I ever tell any other potential buyer's agent the price, the terms, the closing date. So we're not talking about that. We're just talking about simply saying there either is or there is not an offer. If you can imagine, if everyone negotiates a little bit differently, and if a seller wanted to keep that private and hadn't told you in the form of initialing here and doing this checkbox, they could get really frustrated and really, really mad at you. And so this is a super duper important and excellent thing to talk about with sellers ahead of time. Most sellers, when I go over this form with them, they literally look at me almost cross-eyed and say like, why wouldn't I want to tell people if there's other offers already? And I don't know. I honestly can't figure it out. But some sellers may prefer not to, and right here, they give you permission to or to not. As a seller, if you're a part of a community association, even if it's not a condo building, like there are a lot of single family homes that are a part of community associations that have a simple rock monument with the name of their neighborhood as you drive in. That is a community association that we need to be informed of as a seller, because the title company, the mortgage company, the buyer's agents are all going to come upon this in at least at some point in the process. So it's important ahead of time for the seller to have collected all the information that they know about any community association that they're a part of, and there may be a fee that they have to pay to get those documents. If the seller is selling this as an investment property and planning to purchase another investment property, which would be a tax-deferred exchange, also called a 1031 exchange to avoid capital gains taxes, they'll have told you long before you're going over this form. But you need to make sure and explain to people that according to the IRS section 1031, that they need to work with a separate 1031 exchange consultant who can help them do it, and there's an additional fee for that. Likewise, as licensed realtors who hold our license with the state of Minnesota and do continuing education to stay up to date on it, we are highly trained in the field of real estate and marketing properties, but there's no possible way that we can be highly trained in everything else that's going to touch your real estate transaction. So for example, we're not experts in zoning and surveying. We're not experts in title examination. We can't be experts in tax and accounting. And there may be some other professionals that they need to seek services on, and again, they may have to pay some additional money for that. We can always give you recommendations of names of people who are in these fields if they need them. According to Minnesota state statute, every single family dwelling with a sleeping space has to have a carbon monoxide detector within 10 feet. So as you're walking through with your sellers and preparing their house for sale, make sure and be keeping an eye out for that. And we put that in here because they're not expensive, but most home inspectors and even some mortgage appraisers are going to come in and say like, oh, you gotta add these carbon monoxide detectors. And again, if that frustrates the seller, you can always come back and say, hey, you know, I know it's frustrating, but I just want to remind you, we talked about it on this date and time when you signed this form. Probably the biggest thing is selling a house, packing up and moving is incredibly stressful. And it's stressful at the time that you prepare and list your house. It's stressful at the time that you negotiate to sell your house. But there's no more stressful day than those like 2 days before closing, because you are boxing up, you are trying to clean up, you're realizing there's repairs that you probably still have to make because things are scratched and not looking quite right. It's just a high stress time. So we want to be reminding our sellers that that closing date is a contractual date, but it's a moving target. Not every house closes on time. We really want it to, but if your house doesn't close on time and you already have the semi lined up and you've already got the movers lined up and you've already got, you know, the whatever lined up, probably additional closings, there's going to have to be an open mind for the possibility of this changing. Likewise, you have to expect on the morning of closing or possibly the day before closing that the new buyers of your house, accompanied by their realtor, are going to schedule an appointment where they get to come to the house and conduct what's called a final walkthrough of the property. And the house has to be in substantially the same condition as it was at the time of purchase. And this substantially word is kind of one of my least favorite vocabulary words now, because substantially is pretty subjective, it's pretty gray. But basically what this means is, if your kid ran down the hallway and knocked off a cabinet door, you need to pay someone or do the work on your own to properly reattach the cabinet door. If your air conditioner stopped working, you need to fix the air conditioner. It needs to be in the same condition that it was when they made the offer on the house. All right. So that is that form. The next form is really pretty simple. This is just an affiliated business disclosure. So I don't know if you've ever bought a new car, but if you have, or maybe you've seen a car commercial, there's a high probability that they went over a form a lot like this, and they said, hey, congratulations, you're buying a new Ford F-150, and we happen to own Ford Credit, we happen to own Ford Warranty, we happen to own all these Ford associated businesses, and because there's common ownership in all those business instances, you as the consumer deserve to be informed of that or disclosed of that. So likewise, Keller Williams Preferred Realty is owned by a group of owners. Some of those owners may also have ownership interest in Minnesota Title or these two mortgage companies, which are called New American Funding and Keller Mortgage. You are not required to use any of these listed providers. This is just for informational purposes only. Simple, easy, quick. All right, next we're going to get to some nuts and bolts of the listing documents that are required to put your house on the MLS. So what we've gone through so far is the technical listing contract, but now there's some other kind of ins and outs that are unique. So it is going to be in your best interest every single time in working with a seller that you have them sign a listing contract, even if they're not willing to list their house for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, 6 months. But you've put all this work in. If you have their buy-in, if you have their interest, if you have their loyalty, get that listing contract signed. But then you also have to have them sign what's called a withhold from the North Star MLS. So this would be someone who says like, okay, totally committed to working with you. I really like you. I just can't list this house until, you know, my tulips blossom on May 15th, whatever their personal situation may be. And you say, yep, that's no problem. And you don't even have to give me a date. You don't even have to give me a date. You're just letting me know we have the listing contract. I'm submitting it to the North Star MLS, but it's going to be on as withheld. They then also need to have to realize that if their property is in the withheld status on the North Star MLS, that it keeps their property from being exposed to the market. It does not allow us to do any advertising for the property or any marketing to the property, and it's not going to be on any public websites. And most people in this case are going to say, thank God, my house is like still totally cluttered and I've got 6 projects that I want to do outside. But just to alleviate any confusion, all of it is listed out here. Now, let's just say you sign this listing agreement, and then you're notified by the North Star MLS 30 days later, hey, I wanted to let you know, Edina Realty also just submitted a listing agreement for this house that you have. Well, you're in luck because you're in first position. You've got an executed signed listing agreement, you've got it in withheld, and Edina Realty cannot take that listing from you unless you authorize and give them, cancel the listing and give them written permission to do so. So signing a listing agreement and putting it in withheld is one of the best things that you can do as you grow your business. However, when it's in the withheld status, you can't say on your Facebook page like, hey, super exciting, want everyone to know in the next few months, I'm gonna have this great lake property coming for sale. There can be no public marketing of it. You can talk about it with us here in the office. You can call your 10 favorite agents. You can talk about it at a cocktail party, but you can't put a sign up, you can't do any public marketing. When you're ready to be able to do public marketing, you would use the status called coming soon. However, you can only be in the coming soon status for 21 days, and you cannot, under no circumstances, open the door to show that property to anyone. No realtors, no prospective buyers. What this does though is it gives, it builds a lot of anticipation for the new listing that's going to be coming on. So it allows you to put it on your Facebook page. It goes on the North Star MLS with 1 picture minimum or as many pictures as you want. And it lets everyone know this house will now be available for showings coming on whatever specific date you and your client decide is the right day for showings. Again, in growing your business, this is a really incredibly valuable form for you, because what you would do is you would use that up to 21 days. Most realtors do it for like maybe 10 or 2 weeks. You would use that time and you would canvass the neighborhood, and you would let everyone in the neighborhood know, hey, I'm giving you first glance at knowing that a beautiful home in your neighborhood is for sale. If you know anyone who wants to live in the neighborhood, or maybe you're thinking of moving up, gives you the chance to tell everyone in your sphere all those names that you've taken at open houses, like, look at me, I've got all these pocket listings, I'm in the know, I've got this good information. So coming soon is a really, really good tool for you as you grow your business.
So with the coming soon, I see a lot of people just have 1 picture. Would you recommend, like up until the listing goes live, would you recommend having like the outside pictures, or would you recommend having
I recommend
all the
just
pictures?
one.
Just one.
Because that pretty much assures you that people will take the time to schedule the showing and come there, and once they've scheduled the showing, you know who they are and you can follow up with them. If you put too many pictures on, owls, real analytical types, may say like, I don't like that kitchen, I would never cook in that kitchen, but if they don't know what the kitchen looks like, they're gonna come to find out for themselves, and then you've captured that data, and then with that data, you can educate your seller. The more feedback you receive, the more showings you have, the better you look.
Yeah.
So I recommend just 1 picture.
Okay.
I mean, certainly if the house is like an absolute gem, you can put a bunch of pictures up if you want to, but I think kind of that suspense and mystery, is like, that's just human nature to be kind of intrigued by that. This form is kind of annoying, I'm not gonna lie. When you go on the North Star MLS representing a seller, you can go into showing time and you can fill all this information out on your own. And sometimes it's just easier to copy and paste and do it on your own, but as a convenience too, and a very nice thing, when listing your house on the North Star MLS, the front desk will also put in your showing time instructions. So what that means is if you're listing like a rental property, for example, you would say, hey, call this person first because they're the ones who are actually living there. I want them to confirm the showing, but then notify this person second. This is actually the owner, and the owner just wants an FYI text message, or maybe they don't like their phone blowing up, so they just want an FYI email. It also allows you to say, like, this is a combination lockbox, or this is an electronic lockbox. There's a friendly dog who's going to be in a crate in the basement. Oh, this reminds me here. I talked about this at the team meeting, but just to reiterate, there are some very common phrases that you'll find yourself writing in here many times, whether it be on this form or the listing agreement, whether it be that, I agree to negotiate the commission if it's a dual agency situation. And you can streamline that and make your life a lot easier by creating clauses with that language. So over here under settings, I'll just go to it. Over here under settings and then clauses, you can create personal clauses by clicking this add button up here in this top right. You can add a new clause. You can title it, showing instructions. Then you can type in here. Actually, let's just do it real time. Let's call this showing details. Blah, 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 whatever you say. Maybe you want to center it, maybe you want to number it, maybe you want to bold it. It can be however you want. Then you're going to click save. Then you're going to go back here to your transaction. You're going to go back into forms and back into the showing instructions. And every time you fill out a showing instructions, if you want them to leave a card, not leave a card, whatever your kind of regular MO is, you can click on it, just hover here, and click on it, add the clause, personal clauses, showing details, checkbox, and okay, and then it just automatically fills it in for you. This is particularly nice, I don't want to get too far off subject, but this is particularly nice for those buyers that you make 10 offers with them on, and they're checking it with a fine-tooth comb, but you're rushing to write the offer before you go to the Timberwolves game with your friends, and you know that they're going to be like, oh my gosh, you totally forgot to put in my escalation clause or whatever, so that you don't have to be checking back and referencing, what did I write from last time? You can just do it all in clauses, which is really nice. Okay, so save and exit on that form. This is my very, very, very least favorite form, worse than the showing instructions, single family residential listing input form. It is a doozy. It is so many, many pages long. It is so many, many, many details. We're not gonna go over it, but just I assure you, brace yourself. You put a lot of pressure on yourself when filling out this form. There's only one page that the sellers need to sign, and then I recommend that you tell your sellers, feel free to scan through this if you want to add anything to the information I've provided or if you have any clarifications to make, but this isn't something that you need to go through with a fine-tooth comb. What you do need to understand is by signing this, you understand we as Keller Williams Preferred are members of the Regional Multiple Listing Service. You are now giving us permission to put this information on the regional MLS. It's going to change statuses from active to pending to sold. It's going to remain on the MLS forever, including things that we put on there, like your photographs and any supplements or any additional information that you give us to add to it. So you're giving us permission. I've read and understood the disclosures above, and I certify that the information contained in this form is accurate to the best of their knowledge. This little top right box here is key. It identifies that any of the black boxes are required. The black ovals are required if it is being listed after it's sold as a comparable sold, and the white boxes are just purely optional. So for example, the black boxes that are required would be like, this is how you get to the house, this is the property ID number, like so interesting. Even the city, the state, and the county, they're not required. Now, the more information you can put on here, the better, because these are all ways that people are going to be able to search for your listing, and doing a good job in assisting a seller list their home and sell their home for the best price and terms possible. You're going to want to provide as rich and as thorough information as you possibly can. But not everything is required. Just fill out everything that you possibly can, and as many of the white boxes as you possibly can. So required, is this in foreclosure? Is it owned by a mortgage company? Is it a potential short sale? Is the owner of the house actually an agent, a real estate agent? It's not required to put in the builder's name. It's not required to give information about the bedrooms and bathrooms, the levels that it's on, or the sizes of it. Surprisingly, those aren't required, but it is required to say the year that it was built, This section right here is pretty tricky. It talks about what's the square footage of the foundation, what's the square footage of each level, how many square feet are unfinished, and these are pretty hard to calculate. You can always use a previous listing as a key. This is helpful, but those really are someone else's professional opinion, and it is your responsibility to go in with an actual tape measure. There are property measurers that you can hire if you want. You can even go with them and kind of shadow along to see how they do it. All right, so going all the way down here on this, hey Steve.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Going all the way down here, you're going to get to the last page where it talks about remarks. We are Keller Williams, and we are professionals. We are thorough, and we are exceptional. So prove to me that you're exceptional by changing the agent remarks and the public remarks. I find it as a bit of a personal annoyance when I see people just copy and paste the same information on both the realtor information and the public information, but as you know, the public information is what shows up on Zillow. So this is what your customers are receiving. But how nice for you to have camaraderie amongst the agents who are going to be showing your listing by saying things like, the seller has informed me that their ideal closing is 75 days out. Or the seller has let us know that the carpet is going to be replaced next week. They copied and pasted a lot of the same stuff here in this listing, but try really hard to make your public remarks as flowery and marketing-y and lovely as you possibly can here. And then in the agent remarks, you can just be a lot more simplistic, you know. Roof went on in 2019, new water heater went in 2017. People in the public are going to appreciate that too, but probably not as much as extend your living areas outdoor to the gracious maintenance-free deck, or sip a lemonade on your maintenance-free concrete patio that greets your guests at the front door. Like, try to make those two comments different. Do me the favor.
Yeah.
All right, I do want to point out, this is such a long form, it's really going to behoove you to every couple pages go through and just click the save button here. You've seen me as I've been talking through these forms, just always go down to save and exit. But when you do a bunch of work, especially on a long form like this, try to get in the habit of saving it periodically. But now we will save and exit to go to the next form. We will anyway, frozen.
Do you ever put anything in the financial remarks?
Oh yeah, thanks for mentioning that. I probably should have. If it's a condo or townhouse association that's not FHA approved, that'd be an excellent thing to put in there. This building is not FHA approved. In different markets, like at a time when it was a buyer's market, not a seller's market, there were sellers who were saying, you know, you'll receive a bonus if you sell this, like, you know, realtors mainly. There are a lot of construction companies who did that. So yeah, I mean, there may be some things, but it says that you cannot include contact information or any marketing, so don't put any more flowery language in there, just make it really pretty matter of fact.
And then are those public?
They are. Okay. They are. And they're down here under the finances. So if there was any comments, they'd be in there. Well, this is a bummer. We were having trouble with the technology before. I can't even, oh, here we go, good. Right. I normally give a break, actually even a little bit before this. Does anyone feel like they need a break?
You can keep going. I'm gonna head to the bathroom real quick.
Okay, perfect. And you've heard these before, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. Let's go on then to the various disclosures that your sellers are going to have to fill out. So this is the full property disclosure that we ask sellers to fill out. If the person who owns it is like a trustee for an estate, you know, someone's passed away, or if it's been a rental property and they haven't been in it in 20 years and they moved to California and they haven't been back in it, they can use what's called the seller's disclosure alternative. Actually, anyone can use the seller's disclosure alternative, but it's much better to try to be as thorough as possible with a full property disclosure. So this is something that you will give to them. I always print a printed copy and give it to them in a listing presentation. I let them know that whether they list the home with me or list it with someone else, that they are going to be required to provide this disclosure. And it's a really good thing to plan to work on over a series of a couple of days, because inevitably they're gonna wake up and they're gonna say, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about those bats that we had in our attic in the summer of 2005. I should probably disclose on here that we did have bats. We did have a company come out and take care of them. But you know, if they find in a home inspection that there's bat feces in the insulation in the attic, they're gonna, you know, they're going to try to claim that I'm not being honest with them, or that I'm trying to cover things up for them, and that erodes your trust in the situation. So you want them to not just be filling this out in a rush and fill it out right away. You want them to take their time actually filling it out. It cannot be filled out by you in any circumstances. It has to be filled out by them. You can send it to them electronically, where they'll just be able to type and click and that kind of thing. But giving them a printed copy, I think, is a really good way for them to get started on it. It asks pretty important questions like, is this home suitable for year-round use? Does the property happen to be a manufactured home? We run into that a couple times here. Is the property in a floodplain? Is the road that it's on public or private? Do they know of any encroachments? Do they know of any association covenants or any historical registry information that they need to put on here? What's the general condition of the property? So has there been any damage? Have they then had to file an insurance claim? Did you receive compensation for the claim? Have you made any additions? Do you have any pets? Do you know of any cracks? What's the age of your roof? It goes on pretty in detail. The section that I want you to pay attention to here is something that tends to confuse a lot of people. There's 3 columns when it comes to asking about, are these items in working order? So it's very simple to say like, oh yeah, my air conditioner's in working order, and oh yep, absolutely, my clothes dryer's in working order. But then people tend to get to these things and say like, oh, I don't even have an air exchanger, so I'm gonna write no here, and oh, I don't have a ceiling fan, so I'm gonna write no here. The problem is, if they don't have an air exchanger, they need to write not applicable, not know that it's not working. So maybe they do have a ceiling fan, but it's not worked for the last 4 years. So in that case, they can say, yes, I have a ceiling fan. No, it's not in working order. Oh, no, I don't even have a central vacuum at my house. Yep, I've got a dishwasher and it's working. I've got a doorbell and it's working. Nope, there's not drain tile at my house. So again, that's not applicable, not no. It's really, really important if there are things outside of this list that are on the property, that you go on to fill in these 3 blanks here in the bottom, and you can add additional sheets of paper if you need to. One of the best lessons that I've learned so far as being a broker here was someone represented a seller who had a pool. And the pool, it was winter when they sold it, and to the realtor's knowledge, the pool and all the pool equipment was working. The problem was the next spring or summer, when the buyer moved in and the buyer went to start up the pool heater, it was determined like, oh, so the pool functions just fine, but the heater hadn't worked in 4 years. And the sellers didn't even think of noting that because it wasn't on the list here. So what you should do is you should asking these types of probing questions like, oh, I see you've got a blah, 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 blah in your backyard. You know, let me know. Do you use that often? Has it been working for you? Oh, no, that's just been there since I bought it. That's never worked for me anyway. So things, especially when it comes to mind with the pool, would be like sometimes people have a little cleaner that rolls around at the bottom of their pool heater, mechanical pool cover. Are those things in working order? Are they present and not in working order? It's very, very, very important to disclose that type of thing. Things in garages like air compressors and garage heaters and stuff that might be in a basement of an old 1920s house that like they've just never taken it out. It's there, but it's never worked for them. If they have a well or a septic system, they need to disclose that. They again need to disclose here if they are a foreign individual or not. They also need to disclose if they are aware of any methamphetamine that's been produced at the house. Going on to talk about environmental concerns, and if there's a cemetery in the area. If they've done a radon test, they need to disclose that. And then this is something that they sign right here, they sign it well in advance, it can be any date. And then when an offer is made on the house, the buyer is going to sign it and send it back, and that's proving that they've received the disclosure and that they are, comfortable with the information that's provided. People will often ask, like, Gal, do you think I should mention this, or do you think I should mention that? And your answer is always yes. If it even comes to mind, mention it and write it here in the comments, because it's just really embarrassing for a seller and also you as the seller's agent if something is found either at the inspection, at the pre-closing walkthrough, or worst case, right after closing, and it's something that none of you disclosed. It's embarrassing. It's very, very embarrassing. So that's the property disclosure. And as I mentioned, anyone can also fill out a seller's disclosure alternative. If you are living in your house and you provide a seller's property disclosure alternative, it will raise some eyebrows. It may get you less for your house. It may cause fewer offers to come in. So using the seller's disclosure alternative isn't going to be what we're going to suggest to our sellers, but you should know that they can utilize it if they want to. And there are two options. And actually, this isn't a terrible idea. You can have the seller say, like, hey, let's hire a property inspector. Property inspector will come in, they're gonna write a super long, thorough report, and we are just laying it out there. This is everything that's included in our house, working, not working. We attach it to the seller's disclosure alternative and say, here you go, this is all that we know on our house. What most people do, however, is they don't pay that home inspector and they just say, I'm totally waiving my requirement to disclose anything about the property. I don't know anything about it. I know that it doesn't have a well or a septic system, so they're going to click no on these. I am not a foreign individual. I do not have any knowledge of any methamphetamine that's been produced at the house, and I haven't done a radon test, therefore there's not a radon mitigation system here. And they would just sign that. It looks exactly the same otherwise, and then the buyer signs it and sends it back with their offer. If they do have a well or a septic system, however, they do need to do some additional disclosures for that. Likewise, if the house was built prior to 1978, they need to disclose if there's any lead-based paint in the home. Most sellers are going to say, like, no, I have no idea. However, if it's an original owner of a 1950s house and they do remember there being lead-based paint, they do remember it being a problem, and they do remember painting over it, they do need to disclose that. But most sellers are going to say they have no knowledge of it. The rest of the form then is going to be left blank. Then it comes back with an offer from a buyer saying, okay, so we understand that you know nothing about any lead-based paint, but we do want to find out about it, so we're going to conduct a 10-day risk assessment, or most of them just say I'm waiving the right to have to check it. And you as the realtor, also the realtor representing the buyer, has to sign this form in addition to buyers and sellers. You as the realtor don't have to sign any of the other ones, however, which is interesting. If you have a well or a septic system, you use these two forms here. The well for, both of them are actually going to require that you do some research. So you're going to want to find out what the exact well number is. You're going to say if it's in use. You come upon a lot of houses like in Bloomington specifically, where they had an old well that was servicing the house and then it's been capped. So you would want to disclose whether it's in use or if it's, or in use, not in use, or if it's actually been sealed. And sealed is the ideal situation for something like that. If it's a shared well, like when you show acreage properties on the outlying fringy suburbs, you'll find a lot of houses on like 2 acres and 8 houses together share a well, for example. We need to disclose it here. How many properties does it serve? Who manages it? Is there a shared maintenance agreement? Then going on and getting some definitions here. So if your sellers are having a hard time figuring out what all of that means, you can go down and show them the definitions. They sign that, and again, it comes back with the buyer. If there is a septic system, it's even more detailed, and that's going to ask, like, how many showers do they take a week? How many loads of laundry do they do per week? Is it a septic tank? Does it have a drain field? Is it a mound system? What's the name of the company who installed it? What's their phone number? What's the size of the tank? When's the last time it was pumped? It's really important that you try to fill this out as thoroughly as possible. I see a lot of these come back almost blank, and it just doesn't serve the purpose of like truly educating the buyer who deserves to be educated. There's also something called a amendment to the disclosure statement, and this is really overlooked. Once you've filled out a property disclosure statement as a seller, if you have a storm that goes through, just like yesterday, there were a bunch of storms. If you have a storm that goes through and you get hail damage on your roof, you need to immediately amend your disclosure statement, whether your house is just listed or already under contract, and you need to add additional facts and information. Likewise, if something was found after the house is under contract, if something was found in the home inspection that then a buyer said, well, I'll live with it, or I'm even asking you as the seller to fix it, you technically really should encourage your sellers to amend their property disclosure, because previously they said, hey, nothing's wrong, my furnace is in good working order. And now after the home inspection, they found it was not in good working order. They had to replace the pilot light, or they had to replace this part or the board or whatever. It's a good idea to write that on there and date that on there. So utilize that amendment. That is my strong recommendation.
So you don't need a disclosure statement right away, correct? Or when you go, until you go live, you need it right when you go live?
Correct. Yep,
Okay.
yeah. But I have people start filling it out even before they fill out the listing agreement with me.
Okay,
It takes a lot of time and energy to put all that accurate information on there, so I like to have them working on it for a couple weeks. If they have a well and septic system, we also need to give a little drawing here of what the property looks like. Let me see if I can, not worth the time. It can literally just be in pencil. It can literally just be a line drawing. Most people say, my road is here, my road is here, my driveway is here, my house is here, my well is in the front, and my septic system is in the back. It can be very, very, very basic. Some people go in a lot more detail, but it doesn't need to be. It just has to give some generalities. All right, just 5 more forms. We are gonna power through these, okay? Like the listing input form, which I said is kind of a thorn in my side, the estimate of net proceeds worksheet is also a little bit of a thorn in your side. We require at Keller Williams that you fully disclose to sellers how much it's going to cost to sell their house. So as you have them sign the listing documents, you also need to have them sign a proceeds worksheet, and I'm gonna make sure when I'm auditing that it's dated that date. Then when they actually go under contract, if the price is the exact same, you get a freebie and you can just upload the same form. If it's not, whether it's up or down, you need to do another form and you need to have them re-sign it. But the purpose of this is, it is an Excel spreadsheet. It automatically does the mathematics for you. But the purpose of this is to help them see, if you sell your house what we're gonna list it for, which is $200, great. If it sells for less, here's an estimate of what lesser amount that you have in expenses, and therefore also what you would make. If it sells for more, this is what you get. So I recommend using all 3 columns, recommend asking them what their mortgage balance is and putting it there. Some of the proceed sheets that I see just have a disclaimer on the bottom that says this does not include your mortgage payoffs or any other loans that you have on the property. But I recommend filling that in. And then you're gonna have to do some math here to figure out what are their property taxes and what's the proration of that. There is on the dashboard, there is a video of Colin Manson, who's the operating principal, Olivia's husband, going through how he calculates out a net proceeds worksheet. And I think we're gonna have some classes on that coming up too. If there's any special assessments that the seller hasn't paid in full, you write that in there. You put what the commission is here for yourself and what the commission is for the buyer's realtor. If there's any other like seller paid closing costs, then you're also gonna write in here what the deed taxes are and what the fee is that you have to pay to the title company, so on and so forth. But again, you're gonna have to do that 2 times. It's labor intensive and a little bit annoying, but it's really, really important from a disclosure perspective for your liability here at brokerage. Now, let's say that you now we're gonna talk about some unique situations, kind of like that facilitator thing. So let's say that you went on a listing appointment, they weren't ready to sell your house right now, but you said to yourself, oh my gosh, this is absolutely perfect for my brother Or like, I know that my best friend has been looking for a house like this forever. You could do something called, it used to be called a one-time showing agreement, and that's a little bit more logical name if you ask me. But the showing and compensation agreement is an agreement between you and a seller that says, hey, I'm not listing my house with you. I just am going to allow you to show it to these people, and you would list their names there. So you'd probably want to throw on a couple of names in addition to the one that you know wants to see it, and other people that you might convince. And then you also want to make sure and let them know this would be the compensation that would be paid to me. I would do it as a facilitation, so I'm only going to charge you the 2%. You always have to disclose what our brokerage administrative fee is, and that's $4.99. And then it goes on, and it is literally just the exact same as a listing agreement. So again, it talks about arranging for closing. It talks about, are they a foreign individual? It talks about non-discrimination. Electronic signatures are just as valid. So you fill that showing and compensation agreement out with a seller if you don't plan to list with them, but you want to show it to someone specific. This might also be something that you would do if you're utilizing the golden letter approach, where you're mailing letters to people saying, I have buyers that are looking in your area. They may say, well, I don't totally want to list with you, but I'd agree for you to show my house a time or two. Another unique situation, oh wait, I did this wrong, I'm gonna exit. Another unique situation is if you need to change the listing contract. So maybe you've said that you're going to list this house from May 10th, 2022, all the way to May 10th, 2023. And now you've just decided, oh my gosh, these people are awful to work with. I'm gonna amend this listing contract, and if I don't have it sold by the end of June, I am just saying, you are too much to deal with. So you could change the date at the end of the listing contract. Let's say you forgot to put in that clause on there that talks about being willing to negotiate your commission lower. You could add that in here after the fact. So make sure and amend your listing contract if any of the terms that you wrote in the listing contract change. That also reminds me, on the single family listing input form, there's one teeny tiny optional checkbox that you have to include if you are going to be willing to negotiate your commission. And I'm going to show you where that's at on here so that we don't forget it. You've missed it already, so bear with me. Get it, I think it's right up at the top. And it just asks, is it a variable rate commission? Oh, here. So listing price, listing date, buyer, broker, compensation, and then is it a variable rate commission? You're gonna want to check that on all the listings that you show if you get in a multiple offer situation, because it's down here. So here's the buyer broker compensation of 2.7%, and it's exclusive right to represent. They're accepting only cash and conventional financing on here, and then is this a variable rate commission? So you can be assured if there's multiple offers, Hans is not reducing his commission to represent a buyer to get the seller more net proceeds. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
You'll want to be checking to see in multiple offer situations if there's a variable rate commission. Okay, as we are on the North Star MLS, as you know, the status can be coming soon. It can be sold subject to something else that's likely home inspection or review of the association documents. It goes into the pending status, and then it ultimately goes into the closed status. Anytime you change those statuses with your seller, I recommend that you have them sign this listing change form. Now, the office doesn't require it because it's just kind of a logistics nightmare around here, but in the best interest of having written agreement from your seller, you're gonna wanna use the listing contract amendment. And it's one of those things where I'm gonna say, do as I say, not necessarily as I do, because I'm not even so good about doing it all the time either. But if you're working with a challenging seller and he says like, well, I didn't know this was going into the pending status. Now my cousin in Switzerland can't see my listing and I wanted him to be able to see my listing. He may be frustrated that it's moved into the pending status and he didn't give you like true authorized permission. So you use this amendment to listing contract. Oh no, sorry, just the wrong one. You use this listing change form, sorry, and contract amendment. And that's where you would then have the listing number on here, you'd have the address, you have your information, and you change the status to pending. Pending date, projected closing date, who's the realtor who represented the buyer. And then when it comes to closed, again, the office does not require this change form, but it is a good idea to do the sold as well. And you can see down here that the owner signs it. If you decide to cancel a listing agreement, that's the only time that you really do need to have this form. You would change it to status change canceled down here. What date do you want it off the market? And then this is something that you actually have to send me to sign as well. If the listing is being canceled. One last form, and we've gotten through this in record time. I put this in here as a seller's form because, as I've mentioned a couple times, if the property that you're selling is a part of an association, the buyers have the right to receive all the information on the association that's humanly possible to gather. And so I like sellers to have this as kind of a framework to say, these are the things that you're looking for to get from your association. You're gonna want what's called a resale disclosure statement. They're also very likely going to want rules and regulations for the association. They're very likely going to need the budget for the association, and then they're also going to want these long wordy legal documents called declaration, any amendments to those, articles of incorporation, and bylaws. You also then put in here who the property management company is and proper contact information, websites, phone numbers, email address, and whatnot. But what's really, really important for you as a seller is once you've collected, as a seller's agent, once you've collected all this information and you've handed it over to the realtor representing the buyer, I want either that realtor representing the buyer or the buyer themselves to sign receipt of this. Because if something comes up prior to closing and they say like, oh my gosh, I can't close on this property, I can't have my Great Dane. You're gonna say, well, I told you that when you had your 10-day right of rescission, and you even acknowledged that you received this. So you can't go bringing that up now, and go complaining about it after closing. This is something that you've given them within their time that they have to review.
So that's what they review in the review period of the statutory rescission?
Exactly.
That's the only form they're reviewing?
Well, that's a cover note to all the forms that they actually review.
Okay.
The forms that they review are super, super long and really a lot of legal mumbo jumbo. But you need to distill down in there that it'll say things like, you can only have one dog or two cats, you can't have any wild animals, you can't park your trailer in the driveway.
My parents live in associations, just a nightmare.
It is a nightmare, isn't it? Yeah, it's a pain. Yeah, it is a pain.
Just the basic stuff thrown in there.
That's just a cover note to saying I'm attaching all this other information.
Okay.
And that covers it. Thanks, you guys. Anyone on
Yes,
Zoom
thank
have
you.
questions?
No, was really good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, I'm glad, Ronnie, that you sat through it. Did you learn anything new?
I did. Yeah, I did.
Oh, that's awesome. Good. Well, I hope you can weave it into your listing presentations and that it covers your bases and your liabilities even better than before.
We did talk about the forms and information that you have to collect, but where do you have to go on the North Star, to start putting that information in?
Yeah, I can show you that. Emily, do you have any questions?
I do not. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I know it's a lot to sit through, so thanks for your patience.
No, this is really good. I wanted to come in person, but I'm dealing with an illness, so I don't want to get everybody sick. So I'm glad that you guys have it on Zoom. I appreciate it.
Oh, good. All right, we'll get better soon.
Thank you.